In the heart of a construction site, the sound of hammers and saws echoed like a daily ritual. But in an instant, everything fell silent. The body collapsed, the heart stopped, and silence filled the air as if time had frozen. What seemed like just another accident concealed something much greater, a journey beyond life. If you're looking for stories that reveal what lies beyond the last breath, subscribe now and immerse yourself in this dark and fascinating universe. Every detail of this experience will captivate you until the end. And if you feel the intensity of this narrative, leave a like to support the channel. And when you're finished, share this video with someone who needs to hear that death is not the end, but perhaps the beginning of something few dare to face. Breathing ceased, and the physical world dissolved like smoke before an invisible wind. The body lay motionless, but consciousness was ripped away, as if sucked in by a force that allowed no resistance. First came absolute silence, a silence so profound it seemed to crush any thought. Then a dense, living darkness, which was not merely an absence of light, but a pulsating space, a void that seemed to observe. Each fragment of identity shattered, and the feeling was of being stripped of one's own existence. There was no ground, no sky, only an endless abyss. The man realized he wasn't dreaming. The lucidity was cruel, every detail more real than any moment lived in flesh and blood. The cold cut through him, not to his body, but to his soul. Time did not exist, and the notion of past or future dissolved like sand through his fingers. Fear grew not as panic, but as an inevitable certainty. He was crossing over to a place of no return. Suddenly the void began to transform, and a dark tunnel opened up, an invisible force pulling him inside, as if he were being swallowed by something larger than the universe. Distant sounds echoed, not human voices, but murmurs that seemed to carry ancient secrets. Each step on this journey was accompanied by a feeling of silent judgment, as if the very void were weighing down her life, her choices, and her mistakes. The man tried to resist, but there was no way. The emptiness wouldn't tolerate a fight. It was as if he were standing before a door that closed behind him, severing any connection with the world he knew. Even when his heart was still, he seemed to feel every beat of a destiny he couldn't control. Fear turned to despair, and despair to surrender. It was at that moment that something unexpected happened. In the midst of the darkness, a spark appeared, small and fragile, but so intense that it tore through the surrounding void. The light grew, and with it came a feeling of warmth and presence. It wasn't just a bright light. It was a living, conscious force approaching. The man realized he wasn't alone. The void, once absolute, began to bow before that apparition. The crossing was not just a path to nowhere, it was a portal. And on the other side, something awaited. Something that would forever change the destiny of that man who, until moments before, believed his story had ended. In the heart of that absolute void, where every fragment of identity seemed to dissolve, something began to tear through the darkness. First, a fragile, almost insignificant spark, but so intense that it seemed to defy nothingness itself. The light grew, and with it came a feeling that could not be described in human words. Warmth, presence, truth. It was not merely brightness. It was a living, conscious force approaching with overwhelming intensity. The man lost during the crossing realized he was not alone. The darkness that had once reigned supreme now receded before that apparition. And then, the figure revealed itself, and there was no doubt, no confusion. It was Jesus. Not as a distant image, but as a presence that invaded every part of the soul. His eyes were not just eyes. They were mirrors reflecting hidden secrets, concealed pains, forgotten sins. There was no judgment in words, but a silent revelation that weighed more than any sentence. Time ceased to exist, and the man not only saw, he felt. Every memory of his life appeared before him as if projected into an invisible space. Mistakes, choices, moments of pain and joy, everything was there, exposed, and Jesus did not condemn him. On the contrary, there was an indescribable peace, a love so profound that it seemed impossible to bear. It was as if the very essence of life was before him, offering not only forgiveness, but purpose. There was a touch, subtle yet devastating, when Jesus reached out his hand. There was no physical contact, but a direct connection with the soul. In that instant, the man understood that death was not the end. The crossing was not merely a path to nowhere, but a portal to something greater. The mission was not yet clear, but one thing was certain. He had been chosen to return. The once menacing void now bowed before the light. The man felt he was being prepared, molded, transformed. There was no going back to being the same. The apparition was not merely a spiritual encounter, it was a calling. A calling that would forever change the destiny of the one who believed his story had ended. And in the instant that light enveloped everything, the man knew that his life would no longer be his own. He was part of something greater, something that transcended time, space, and death itself. The void was no longer just darkness. The presence that had emerged expanded, filling every space with an almost unbearable intensity. The man was not facing an ordinary sight, but a reality that transcended all human logic. Jesus was not merely an enlightened figure. It was as if the universe itself had bowed down to reveal his essence. The feeling was of being in the presence of something that could not be measured or explained, only felt. Time ceased to exist. There were no seconds, minutes, or hours. There was only a state of full consciousness where every detail of man's life unfolded before him like fragments of a film. He not only saw, but relived. Every mistake, every pain, every wrong choice emerged with cruel clarity. But alongside this were also moments of kindness, simple gestures that had touched other lives. Everything was exposed without masks, without excuses. Jesus did not speak with words. His communication was direct, penetrating the soul like an inevitable revelation. Man felt he was being measured not by human rules, but by an absolute truth. And surprisingly, there was no condemnation, there was understanding, there was love. A love so profound that it seemed impossible to bear, as if it were greater than the heart itself could contain. The encounter became surreal because there were no limits, and the man not only perceived the presence of Jesus but merged with it. It was as if his essence was absorbed by that light, as if every part of his soul was rebuilt. The fear vanished and was replaced by an indescribable peace. But along with the peace came something unexpected, a calling. He understood that he wasn't there to stay, the journey wasn't the final destination. It was a path to reveal that his life still had purpose. Jesus enveloped him in an energy that not only healed but transformed. The man felt he was being prepared to carry a message, a mission that transcended his own existence. The surreal aspect wasn't just the encounter itself, but the certainty that death wasn't the end, but merely a door. And by crossing it, he had discovered that there was something greater, something that awaited every human being. The encounter with Jesus wasn't just a spiritual vision, it was a calling. A calling that would forever change the course of his life. The instant the light faded was like a brutal tear in his soul, and the man felt the emptiness again, but this time not as condemnation, but as transition. His previously motionless body began to react. His heart raced frantically, as if fighting to recover every lost second. Air violently rushed into his lungs, and his eyes snapped open to a scene that seemed impossible. Yet he was back. His shocked co-workers watched in disbelief as what had once been a lifeless body now breathed, trembled, and rose as if it had crossed an invisible abyss. The silence of the construction site was replaced by cries of astonishment, but inside the man there was only one certainty: he had not returned by chance. The man knew that something had changed, and it wasn't just survival, it was a rebirth. The feeling of peace he had experienced in his encounter with Jesus still pulsed within him, but along with it came a weight, a responsibility. He carried a mission he didn't yet fully understand, but which burned like fire inside him. Every glance around seemed distant. The tools, the concrete, the noise of construction, nothing held the same meaning anymore. He had seen what few dare to face, the boundary between life and death. And at that boundary, he had discovered that death was not the end, but the beginning of something greater. The return was unexpected not only for those who witnessed it, but for him as well. The journey had left invisible marks, scars that could not be seen on his body but shaped his soul. He couldn't explain in words what had happened, but he knew he needed to share it. The calling wasn't to keep it silent, but to reveal to the world that there is a truth beyond the last breath. As he rose, still frail, he felt each step guided. There was no more room for doubt, and the accident had not been just a disaster, but a portal. And by crossing it, he had received a mission that would change not only his life, but also the lives of those willing to listen. From the moment he returned, nothing seemed the same. The man carried within him an invisible mark, a weight that did not come from the accident, but from what he had witnessed beyond the boundaries of life. Each breath was different. Each gaze seemed deeper, as if the world had lost part of its illusion. he knew he hadn't returned by chance. The journey hadn't just been a nightmare, but a calling. The following days became strange. The noise of the city, the rhythm of routine, everything seemed distant. He walked among the living, yet his mind was still imbued with the memory of the light that had pierced the void. The presence of Jesus was not an ordinary memory. It was an open wound, a revelation that pulsed in every thought and that could not be ignored. The mission wasn't delivered in words, but in feeling. It was as if every gesture, every choice was now guided by something greater. He understood that his life no longer belonged to him, and the accident had been the portal, and the return the opportunity. What was once merely survival had now become purpose. He began to notice signs around him. People who crossed his path carried invisible pain, and somehow he knew he needed to be there for them, not as a savior, but as a witness. A testament to the fact that death is not the end, that something beyond awaits every human being. The mission was clear: to share without fear that there is a truth greater than what the eyes can see. The surreal aspect wasn't just the encounter, but the transformation that followed. The man didn't return to continue the same life. He returned to be a bridge between two worlds. Between what is tangible and what is eternal. Between the silence of the construction and the call that echoed within him. And so each step became a reflection, each word carried weight. He didn't need to convince anyone, only to reveal what he had lived through. Because the experience wasn't just his, but that of everyone who had ever wondered what exists after the last breath. In the end, the mission wasn't about him, it was about everyone. About remembering that life is fragile, that death is just a door, and that beyond it lies a truth that few dare to face. A truth that, once revealed, can never be forgotten. If this story made you reflect on what lies beyond the last breath, don't let this journey end here. First, subscribe to the channel to follow each new dark and revealing tale we bring you. Then leave a like to strengthen this community that seeks to understand the mysteries between life and death. And share in the comments what you felt when listening to this experience, as your perspective can open doors for other people who are also seeking answers. And don't stop here, there are other stories waiting for you. Experiences as intense as this one, that reveal hidden secrets from beyond. Keep exploring because each video is a new journey, and each journey can forever change the way you see life.